an upcoming continuing education course. So, sorry, I'm going to go over that again. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about an upcoming continuing education course that I'm going to be leading in Boston, Massachusetts in late August. And Brandon Levac and Andy McClarkey are nice enough to bring me in, and we're going to be discussing running injury management. And this is a topic that a lot of folks encounter runners from a performance standpoint, as well as injured runners. And from a didactic standpoint, we don't get much training. And what invariably ends up happening is a lot of folks are mismanaged, or they end up being plagued by persistent or recalcitrant injuries. So I wanted to just sort of open up the floor and let you guys ask me any questions, or whatever you want to cover as it relates to the course in Boston.
Yeah, so anyone who doesn't know, I'm Brandon Levac. This is Andy right over here. So really what we want to go over is what's your background? How did you get in a position where you sort of work with a lot of runners? How did you get to where you are?
So, I've always been running, and even from a young age, I guess people used to identify me by having some speed, and I ended up carrying that over into different sports, and I was playing a lot of really every sport in the book. And I ended up getting hit with a slew of injuries, which were a combination of, overtraining. Let's just say my ecosystem was out of balance, and I ended up dealing with 5 surgeries, 14 injuries, and that put me on the path to PT school. And going through PT school, I always thought I had a good handle on running, just because perhaps I had a little bit more of just an ability to run. But when I got out and started working with people, injured runners in particular, I would take them through the rehab process. We would get their pain under control or resolve it, and they would be back to most activities of daily living. And every time they would go to run, they would end up blowing up and coming back to me and saying, look, I just haven't had any luck returning to running. And I said, man, I thought I had a good handle on this. So I started really just going back and taking a closer look at the literature. And this helped me refine my understanding and my approach. And what you see is that the literature is, it's very elaborate. It's conflicting in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of information that you just don't get exposed to during your formal education. And that's largely a function of, there's just so much material to cover when you're in physical therapy school. So, the more I spent time in a clinic, I just started really combing through the literature, watching videos, spending time around gifted runners, and I started to get a little bit better of a handle on it. And one of my goals, and what I'm passionate about, is trying to demystify running injury management as well as performance running. And that's what sort of led me to develop this series of continuing education courses, because I want to help, again, demystify this. So when healthcare professionals, trainers, coaches are working with runners, that they realize that there's a simple framework that they can adopt and have great success in using. So but I feel it's a very confusing subject matter, just because of all the information out there between shoe manufacturers, between the lay press, between medical professionals who claim to really have a good handle on running injury management, because you never want to turn away an injured runner. There are a lot of injured runners that are going to be needing your help. So no one's ever going to say, oh, I don't know how to take care of runners. I mean, you're going to end up putting yourself out of business. So, and now I feel like I have a pretty good handle on it. By no means, I mean, we're always going to continue to learn more and more and to refine our understanding. But that's sort of where I am at this point. And I'm competing as well in long course triathlon. And needless to say, there's a lot of running that goes into it. And so I use my own self to experiment with, if you will. But I just feel at this point I have a good command of the whole spectrum, from the time someone may be injured to getting them back, to consistent training, and then to reach performance objectives. So that's sort of where I stand at this point.
All right. Where you know, we both obviously follow you on Facebook, and we see a lot of different videos that almost look too simple to be true. You know, like all of your single leg work. Where do you see most people going wrong with their rehab or just their strength training components? They'll go too much and try to just make it too fancy.
So you're breaking in and out there a little bit, but where do most people go wrong? I think the thing that's important to keep in mind with running is running has, and I'm talking about distance running here, there are a very specific set of performance demands that we need to prepare runners for. And this is something that should be a little bit more straightforward, because it's not a lot of cutting, pivoting, twisting, turning, abrupt starting and stopping while someone's trying to tackle you or steal a ball away or strip a ball away from you. So when I see that injury rates are upwards of 80%, to me that's unacceptable. And it's just a reminder that we don't have a good command of helping injured runners on average. So, you know, I would say that most people complicate the rehab process, or they give folks too advanced of an exercise or a group of exercises to start. So, you know, one of the things that you want to make sure that you do right off the bat when someone comes in is to stage and type their injury. And this is something that most folks don't take the time to do. So, you know, I use Bruce Wilks' classification system. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. It gives you a very simple and objective and practical approach to doing that. So, you know, that's online. I'm not going to go through it in detail right now, but my priorities are to make sure that I address any signs or symptoms of inflammation if someone comes in, to make sure that we normalize their walking mechanics and that they can fully weight bear through the affected extremity, because otherwise they're going to adopt compensatory patterns. From there, I want to make sure that they can progress a leg over the foot, which is ankle dorsiflexion. And not so much, I'm not so much concerned about gastroc tightness, because the research doesn't support that. It's really ankle dorsiflexion with the knee flexed, and that's a lot of talocrural mobility. And people invariably end up cheating that, and that's when we start seeing folks go into a little bit more pronation than they otherwise need to, or they may start going into excessive hip adduction. And that's when we start seeing femoral rotation control issues. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to have pain whatsoever, but these are just things I'm trying to sort of engender the best possible environment. And from there, they need to tolerate open and closed chain lower extremity contractions. They need to have good frontal plane stability. And then they need to learn to hop from one leg to the next, because running's a plyometric activity. And that's why if you don't systematically prepare someone to return to running, I always show people a piece of toast, because that's what they're going to be dealing with. All right. That's what I love about running. You skip any of those steps and you let someone repetitively jump from one leg to the next, they will come hobbling home for the most part. So now that's really, when I teach this course, what I'm providing people, again, is a framework and a graded exposure approach to exercise, and getting people to refine their clinical decision making. And I give them a lot of mantras, and I teach them how to speak to runners. And that's something that never gets discussed. So when a runner comes in to see me, I'm typically just getting off the treadmill, but I'm definitely in running shorts, a t-shirt, running shoes. They just know they're at the right place. And I tell them my goal is not to shut you down, but at the same time, I'm going to protect you from yourself, because runners tend to have motivation cloud their judgment, and they become their own worst enemy. So that's sort of, you know, the crux of the course. And, you know, I infuse as much of the research into that as possible. And the cool thing about the research now, there's a lot of systematic reviews, a lot of meta-analyses, because, you know, there's been so many papers published with, you know, strengths and weaknesses. So that's how we've gotten to these systematic reviews and meta-analyses, and it's good. We get a lot of just very simple takeaways from these studies. A little bit of a mouthful, I know.
Yeah. Amy, a lot of like a down approach or a bottom up approach are taking a lot of information from both to try to treat the runner as a runner versus taking a set like body part to look at first and going that route. Is that kind of a good way to sum it up, or do you kind of take a look at it from an inside-out approach or a ground-up approach when you take a look at a runner? I don't know. That was the best, but
No, you're breaking up a little bit there, but so you were asking me whether I take a top-down or a bottoms-up approach, or
yeah.
Well, the one thing that I would say is everyone is arguing about strike pattern. They continue to argue about strike pattern. And what we have to agree on is that you have to progress through the foot. Okay, ideally the great toe or the first ray. And you have to progress the leg over the foot, especially with distance running. Okay, so I definitely put a lot of attention on those particular aspects. With that said, I also am very curious when a runner comes to see me, what their understanding of their problem is, or what they think landed them in this situation. So, you're really trying to help them reconceptualize their situation. So I guess in that regard, I'm using, sort of a top-down and a bottoms-up approach. But it's individualized, and this is why we'll never get to an algorithm or sort of a cookie-cutter approach to working with runners. So, I end up doing a combination of both, but it all depends on that runner who's in front of me and what their experience is. Most of the time in outpatient orthopedics or in outpatient physical therapy, you're going to be dealing with recreational runners for the most part. I definitely do a lot of performance coaching, so I get to see a lot of injured performance runners. But the other thing you have to consider is that the more experienced a runner is, their injury threshold is typically higher, or they have a better appreciation. So what I mean by that is, I'm dealing with some pain on the superior aspect of my patella, very low grade. Would I ever go see someone for it? No, because I'm not running with Ultra Mechanics. It's a little bit sore if I, am in a sustained sitting position for a while, but I'm not concerned about it. I know that there's no necessarily serious tissue injury. So I say, look, this is perhaps part of an adaptation process, but it's not interfering with my training whatsoever. So again, every runner has to be addressed on an individualized basis. And sometimes that may be more of a bottoms-up approach. Sometimes it may be more of a top-down approach.
Perfect. So I know the course is geared towards medical professionals, treatment of injured runners. Would the course be at all of any benefit to, let's say, a performance coach who just wants to know more about the process of what a medical professional is looking for? Would there be some type of takeaways for like a performance coach to be able to come to this course and actually learn something? Obviously, we don't want them treating, but can they learn something to take away and that would be beneficial for them to come?
Absolutely. And, the thing to keep in mind is I personally am a performance athlete. So, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And with the runners that I work with, even though a good portion of this weekend course is centered around refining how medical professionals approach injured runners, this is all spectrum. And the more a performance coach understands what constitutes sound running injury management, the better they're going to be, because they're going to be able to steer their athletes to the right folks, and they're going to have a greater understanding of the whole process. So I try and spend so much time with different professionals in different disciplines outside of physical therapy. And that's something I encourage every physical therapist, or really people in any profession, because it's helpful to have a broader lay of the land, because you're going to understand where your athlete is along the way, and when you may need to pull the plug on a workout. So this will help them just, again, have a framework, and it's only going to make them more effective and refine their decision making. And I think above all else, when people come to work with me, what they're really coming to me for is my decision making and placing trust in me. So, and I try to just act as a reliable and helpful resource in that capacity.
That's exactly what we were looking for. I've had a few different performance coaches reach out to me via private messages, and that was actually a question I was going to ask you in a private message, but I figured I'd just ask here. So that's great to know.
Mark, for example, Mark McLaughlin, who's in Portland, is a phenomenal performance coach. If anyone lives in Portland, they haven't connected with Mark. I mean, he's definitely someone to reach out to. And anytime he comes up to Seattle to go through physiologic testing with the folks at Harriet Sports Performance, we always go out and have a coffee and end up talking for an hour or two, just bouncing off different ideas off each other. So, I spend so much time around performance athletes, coaches, and just people who work in a team environment to get folks to reach the best of their abilities. And just one final thing, with this question, I always tell people, you rehab to train, you train to compete, and you compete to define your limits. All right, so that's really important. That's one of the mantras I stress when I'm working with folks.
Excellent. Do you have a?
I think we're pretty good.
Yeah, I think that really sums up kind of really what we really wanted to get across to people. But do you want to sort of break down? I know we send in the flyer out to people that sort of goes over the layout, but how are you sort of planning on approaching each day? Like, take us through like your layout of like, where do you start and then where do you finish?
Sure. So, I always like to start just giving people a background to say, where were we coming from? Where are we right now? And where are we going? And to do that, we have to base this on the research that people have invested blood, sweat, and tears into publishing. So there's excellent information out there. There's tons of phenomenal researchers, and we need to apply this work, because otherwise we're basing things on thin air. And again, we're never going to have all the answers. So I like to just sort of set the stage, give people, a general, again, lay of the land, and then get into basically first ruling out red flags. Especially with the way physical therapy has gone, is we have direct access. So we need to make sure that we absolutely don't miss red flags, that, we pick up on yellow flags, and then to take someone through a standard orthopedic assessment, which, very rarely do I see people execute good orthopedic assessments. Then from there, we can start tailoring it a little bit more to the running athlete. All right. And that's the other thing. We're going to talk about runners, in the pure sense of the word, but we're also going to just talk about the running athlete and how you want to approach screening them. We'll start going through some of the manual techniques that I use, which, again, very simple. I'm not going to complicate things. And then we'll start going through a graded exposure approach to preparing someone for the performance demands of running. And this is what I put out. All these videos I put out online, you're going to see how they sort of evolve. All right. So obviously you see a lot of the marching drills, but if someone can't weight bear through the affected leg, you better be giving them some open chain exercises. And just to sort of simplify how you prescribe those. But, with runners, you definitely want to get them up in an upright position, loading through each leg, and eventually in a single leg stance. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about the sequence that I'm using, which again is a graded exposure approach. And then we'll get into more advanced exercises and getting into basic strengthening, building comprehensive capacity, and eventually plyometrics. The other thing that you have to understand about running is that there are equipment needs, and the obvious one is shoes. So we need to make sure that we understand shoes in the context of the literature. We need to understand lacing patterns. Believe it or not, people have done a lot of research with lacing patterns. And from there, we'll start talking about how to conduct a simple treadmill analysis without all the bells and whistles, because most folks are not going to have access to an instrumented treadmill in a biomechanics lab, nor do you need to. All right. So it's really, I want to try and tackle all these different aspects because it's only going to position folks to jump into clinic on Monday morning and start having a greater sense of confidence and know where to start. And that's where I think most people go wrong when they're managing injured runners, is they don't start at the right point, or they end up giving people clamshells the whole time. And I wish it was easy as just basically giving someone a sideline clamshell, but unless you're running sideways along a wall, it's not going to work too well. All right. And this is where I think people oversimplify things, which is good. We need to simplify, but you also have to, strip down running and look at it. So again, so it's really a comprehensive course. And I don't want to scare people by saying this, but it's roughly 500 slides right now. And a lot of these slides go very fast, but when people walk away, they're going to have a system in place that they can always go back to the manual and look at it. And this is, I never keep any secrets. You guys know all the information I put out online. I do this because we need to reduce the incidence of running injuries, because it's silly how often folks are getting injured from a sport that, to me, shouldn't have such high injury incidence rates.
So you said 500 slides. Are you providing a location where the slides can be available? I know some people will question and wonder if they have access to all that stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wouldn't travel to Boston if I wasn't going to do that. So, okay. There are a couple ways of doing this, and I think the easiest way is to just put it out as a PDF. That way you have it. It's electronic, or digital, so it can be stored. If I do smaller courses, sometimes I'll put it in a binder. But a PDF in this day and age is the most practical. And I also, after you go through this course, you're going to look at all the videos I put out online and understand what the hell it is that I'm getting at. Because as you know, I put out silent videos. And the reason I do that is because if someone wants to use them, I don't want to pigeonhole them into specific verbiage or directions that they want to give to the patient. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so those are a free resource. I've fallen into the hands of some very talented medical and rehab professionals over the course of my life, and this is just simply my way of giving back. And I'll always keep the silent videos free. I'll obviously be doing some other projects, but I continue to just pump out as long as I have the health and the resources to do it, to just continue to put out as many videos as I can.
Excellent. I think that really all sums up what we really wanted to get accomplished through today's Q&A, to really, show everyone what this course is going to be about. And we're really excited to see you down here in August. So,
can we?
Yeah, so I'm really excited. I went to school in Boston for a brief part of my undergrad, so it's going to be great to return. Now, that was before the big dig, so the city is going to probably look very different. My brother was living in the North End at the time, so I have some very fond memories of Boston. And at that point in the year, I can't think of many places that are better.
Couldn't agree more.
Which hopefully not everyone leaves town, so, but it'll be well worth it. And, I always try to take folks out on Saturday after the course to run. I would spend a lot more time running, but I also want to get the information to people. But that's something that, to me, I think is helpful to to go out, and I'm not going to do it, a 10 or 12 mile run, just to go out for, anywhere from 3 to 6 miles, pending weather, and just to talk to people. And then, we'll go out and have some food, have a beer, whatever the case may be.
Sounds great.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing you.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time to bring me in. It means a lot, and I'm confident that I'll deliver, and you guys will really enjoy the information.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Of course. All right. Have a good rest of the night, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
you too.